some things that can make your business, like we talked about last week with East Village, where they're talking about how to make the city more sustainable, to be able to redo things and get the city and grow certain areas that may be running down a little bit and improve them. I want to help you today look at your business and how you can continue to grow your business and improve your business in the future. So as we look at that, I want to talk about one thing that I really liked in this book that I'm reading right now. It's in my bag. It's called Accelerate. If you haven't heard of it, it's a great book. And this quote comes from that book. And I'm a big believer in this as I learn more and more about some of the practices that I'm teaching my clients and learning myself. And that is, business as usual is no longer enough to remain competitive. And what they mean by this in that book is they start off the book that way, and they talk about things like if you're a company that has very large projects, very large teams, you know, your timeline on developing and delivering your product is like a year out, then you may be in a situation, and I would recommend that you probably are in a situation, where if you're not careful, your competitor is going to come behind you very quickly and get ahead of you and outmaneuver you because they're able to do a smaller team, get your products out there faster in front of your clients to help them give them feedback sooner, so they reduce that feedback loop to your clients to get information to know really what the client needs. Because if you wait a year, you've kind of already defeated yourself in that regard. So one way that I've found that helps that is when you're working with Kanban. So if you haven't heard of Kanban, what it really is, it's a simple framework, if you will. It can turn into a methodology the more you use it. The further deeper you get into the terminology around Kanban. But it's basically a capstone that fits on top of how you do your work today. And that's one of the big benefits, in my opinion, from Kanban. And so you start and you're starting to focus in on your processes and how you're doing work. And it doesn't come in and change everything. It doesn't come in and prescribe lots of things, but it starts with what you do today, and slowly but surely you improve that. And the focus of it is it unhides your work so that your whole team knows what's going on. It reduces waste, and it helps your team improve their flow of getting work done. And it doesn't fundamentally, though, change your organization, like I said. It's an evolutionary approach to getting your work improved. And so the thing that I love about Kanban is it'll start with what we do with my clients is we'll go and start with like one or two key things that they can do to change in their organization on how they're getting work done. And there's a couple of things you can tweak. There's like, they call them levers in the Kanban community, ways to improve the way you're getting your work done, the flow of your work. And so you'll take and modify a couple of those, and you integrate those into your team, and the team embeds that into the way they get work done. And it's a slow drip approach to change things. It's not this big bang thing to come in and just, change everything all at once. And so you can constantly be improving on your way you're getting work done. And because of that, that's one of the reasons that it's a very low risk investment in how you're going to experiment to get your work done. And obviously one of those is the fact that it's an evolutionary approach. You can start with a small couple of things, try it out, see if it works using the scientific method, right? So just like in elementary school or high school when you learn the scientific method, and you're going to experiment and find the things that make your team flow more efficiently. Now there's a lot of studies that are out there that help with giving you ideas on what to experiment with, but again, it's all in you owning it for your team and improving that. And so that's just one of the things about being an inexpensive experiment. Another is the fact that it will really, and I'm going to show you here in a moment, that it can very quickly, or not quickly, it will very much improve the financial outcomes of your business as well, which is what we're going to talk about here in a moment. And it's very interesting because what it can do is it will actually start aligning your team that is getting work done, the people that are individual contributors. It'll align them with your financial outcomes and the things that you want for your business to do. And it's really interesting because it'll actually do that without them even possibly knowing it. And so you start focusing the team towards that direction, and you can kind of help everyone kind of focus in on that. So what we're going to do today, though, is I want to talk about 3 habits that I've found that are very beneficial with the clients that I work with when working with Kanban. And the first of those is called focus. Now, you may be going, well, what does that really mean, right? Well, I love to show this quote because this, to me, kind of drives it home for us. And this quote says, "The word priority came into the English language in the 1400s. It stayed singular for the next 500 years. Let that sink in, right? Like that doesn't take a whole lot. I don't have to explain that a whole lot, I don't think, right? But what I want to say is in the last 100 years, and especially in business, we've really become addicted to activity over results, especially in the business arena. And so what I want to talk to you about is a concept in Kanban called limiting work in progress. And I know if you're a business owner, you may be cringing a little bit going, wait a minute, Paul, I can't not get more work done. We're in a startup, or we're this. We've got to get more work done. We can't not get more work done. Limiting that work is not going to be beneficial. But what I'll actually tell you is it's actually the opposite of that. When you start limiting what you have in process or in progress, you will actually achieve more by juggling less. And that's some of the things that, and I'll show you here in this example we're going to go over here in just a moment. And I know on the surface it doesn't sound like that'll be the case, but it really is. So I'm going to go over a real-life example that our company has worked with, one of our clients. I've synthesized the data to show a year-long experiment with this team. Now, I want to say first and foremost, your mileage with this may vary, but it's a very great example of one team that has done this. This is just one. Because now I'm an accredited Kanban trainer, I've seen tons of case studies, so it's not the only. I'm just going to show you one that I'm more familiar with that our company has worked with. And so we're going to show you basically that it was a year-long experiment. And so in this experiment, what was going on is we had a team, and they were delivering 2 products or projects every 2 months. So essentially in a year's time, they would deliver around 10 projects. So that's kind of the cadence that this team was going in, right? And so we came in, we helped them, and this is kind of the graph there, and so you can maybe see that. But so like the first point in which they were gaining revenue from that project being launched was in March. So it took them 2 months to get that launched. 1st of March, you had 2 projects in March, and you see each line was every other month, and that was 2 more projects. So there's 10 total for the year of projects or products that were launched for this company. And so they started gaining revenue in March. So when we went and talked to this team, we asked a very bold question, a very made people a little nervous, right? But what we asked was, what would happen to gross revenue if the team worked on only 1 project at a time versus 2, right? Because they're working on 2 now, they're doing them every 2 months. And of course, conventional knowledge, a lot of people's immediate response would be, well, you're going to do less work, you're not going to get as much done, I need to be able to multitask and get this done. But we actually found that that wasn't the case at all. So what we found is when we were focusing the team on 1 project at a time, they were able to deliver that project in a month versus 2 months. So they could deliver a project versus 2 projects every 2 months. And so you can see here, not only did it reduce the amount of time of delivery for their projects, but they were actually able to gain revenue earlier. So they were able to gain revenue a month earlier in the timeline here. And if you count the number of lines, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but something did also happen as well by doing this, and we'll get to that here in a moment. So this is the thing that we've obviously found, and I mentioned that already, right? So because we were able to get the project done sooner, we were able to gain revenue on that project sooner, which meant that we were a month early on those, which also meant you got another month in the year, right? It just kind of makes common sense there. But the thing that I was mentioning earlier that you may have seen on the graph that I wasn't going to tell you, I'm going to tell you now, and that is when we went into this, we were able to also get an 11th project delivered. And so what that actually allowed us, now granted, I understand it didn't actually gain revenue because it was at the very end of the year. But the cool thing was we were priming the pump for the next fiscal year, right, for the finances. You're kind of getting that ready to go, and they're starting to gain revenue in that next year. So that was just helping the team focus is the one aspect we were doing there. And so along with that, we were able to, in this example, we were able to show that they gained around 12% increase in gross revenue. Now, I wouldn't say go take that to the bank. That may not be your mileage may vary with that. But, I mean, as a leader in a company, let's be honest. If you had 1% increase, would you be happy about that? I mean, that's free money. Right? And I'll show you as well, we won't be able to get into all the details, but in my class I'm able to go into that more detail. But we've seen time and time again with our clients, not only are you improving your profitability as a business, but your teams are happier. You're able to do more with your teams. It's very interesting stuff. That's one reason I love it. And it's essentially a win-win situation, because what you're doing is you're allowing your team to be focused and to feel productive. And because of that, they feel like you're giving them a gift. But in fact, they're giving you a gift by making you more revenue as a business. The next topic I want to talk about, the next habit, is called waste reduction. And this is where I want to go over a couple of truths about waste reduction first and kind of tell you a little bit about that. The first is you can't reduce what you don't track. So in this here it says, you cannot reduce waste if you are not actively measuring it. So you can't improve things if you're not measuring it. Like if you're trying to lose weight and you don't weigh in, you may be able to do it, but the results are better for those that actually track how they're doing, right? I'm doing better today. I'm tracking that stuff. And so hopefully if you're a business owner and you realize right now very quickly that your team's probably not tracking that, it may make you a little nervous, right? And it did for me as well when I first started learning about Kanban is, how do we do this? I want to start doing that now. I want to reduce waste. How do we do this? And so here's another truth about this as well when we're talking about waste, which is work can be assigned, and this is something that I've learned in my Kanban journey, is that work can be assigned to everyone. So the work is all assigned out. Everyone's got a name on the ticket that you're doing work or whatever, but it's owned by no one. So you may be in a situation where it's assigned to people, but it's not owned. And what I mean by that, there's not a clear vision of ownership for someone to be driving that piece of work to completion. Okay? And so here's what I do in some of our classes where we talk about this in our public classes, where I'll show a picture of this, right? And I'll ask the class, well, what is the purpose of a car, right? And of course, the obvious thing is it's for transportation, right? You're going from point A to point B. And then what I'll show them next is this great quote from a gentleman who is obviously very invested in transportation, right? And the investment he's got is just tremendous, right? And so he's saying, though, that as a car, you're only using it 5 to 10% of the time, what its purpose is for. And I believe, and I think there's data, and there is data to back this up, that like cars, work is very, very similar in that it is most of the time idle. And so if you start tracking that, you can figure out how to reduce the work that's being idle. And what I mean by that, it may be sitting there waiting for an approval. It may be sitting for some feedback from a stakeholder. It may be waiting feedback from a client on, we've got this thing. And so if you can reduce that waste, then, when the work is going, like say it took 10 days to do this item of work, I would argue that probably 80% of that time was waste, and it wasn't actually being worked on at that 10-day window, right? So how do you get that? How do you reduce that? That's what we help our clients do. And I also want to introduce you to the one thing that we did on this team. So we introduced a social, one communication hack, a social change. And that one social change was when the individual contributor was done with the item of work they were doing, and they were moving it to the next step in the workflow, instead of pushing it to that person in the next workflow, like if I'm done my thing, pushing it to someone else, instead of doing that, what they would do is they would raise their hands and they would say this one phrase. They would say, I'm finished and I'm waiting for this work to be taken from me. And so that one social change helped the team focus from a push system to a pull system. And if you have any familiarity with some of the lean principles, you know that in order for you to have a very lean organization, that can be one of the biggest things that you can do to help your company be lean is by implementing a pull system. And so that's where you start doing that at the team level, where you can help them learn and focus in on the pull system will help them get their work done in that way. And that will help you track that waste as well. And one of the benefits we saw of implementing that pull system with this client was we were able to go from a 4-week delivery to 3 weeks. So we shrunk the delivery time another week. So obviously that gives you a couple more benefits, right? So one of those benefits is we were able to add a 12th project. And then the overall gross revenue from that standpoint, we were able to get it up to 16. Now it wasn't an additional 16, it was just the overall for that team. And again, It may not be 16 for you. It may be 30. It may be 10. It may be 1. I don't know, but whatever it is, it's a benefit, right? You're gonna see a benefit from that, from doing these things. And what we found as well is with these habits is you're able to measure that waste, which will then you start as a team, and the people that are at the lowest level, which you may be familiar with some of the agile principles. The idea is you empower the people that are at the lowest level, that are the closest to the problem, help you determine the solution to the problem, right? Instead of someone on high telling you what to do, you have the people that are in the trenches determining how to benefit, how to improve this, right? Is one way that can be beneficial. And so I've told you I was going to go over 3 habits. We've gone over 2. I've got one more, and then we're going to wrap up. So the next one is called flow. And from a flow standpoint, what we're going to focus on is you can focus on the team level or the portfolio level, but I'm going to focus in today on what we did with the team, and the reason being is at the team level is where you're going to see the most waste potentially in your organization, and you can kind of hone in and help them reduce their waste. And it's also the richest opportunity for improvement usually at the team level, which is why you see other agile methodologies that I won't name will focus in on the team as well, right? And that's where they get a lot of that improvement right off the bat. And so I'm going to introduce you to a concept called swarming. And so it's another term that's in Kanban. Again, we're talking about language, if you will, and how you can get in the mindset of like when you start talking about what does waste mean? How does that different? How do I improve the focus of the team? We're talking about some of these phrases and language, if you will, and it gives you a level set for your team to communicate about those things. And one of those is, again, swarming. And it's an activity that the team goes through to optimize the flow of your work. And so what we're effectively giving them is some principles and policies for them to react to situations in their work that will help them remove those impediments, right? Like if you ask your team today of how they're getting work done, do they have a language, and do they have a language of when an impediment happens, something happens and we can't get work done, how do we solve it? How do we improve it? How do we get past that? Do you just walk around it? And so those are some of the things that we talk with them about. And so basically I'm going to give you 4 just simple examples. This is just an example, but here's some ideas of what we've seen our teams get better at doing and kind of focusing in on when they're swarming. And one of those things would be a card is owned by an absent team member. So like let's say Paul took a vacation, but because in Kanban, another principle that we focus on is finishing over starting. So instead of starting new work while Paul's out on vacation, how can we finish the work that was already in progress so that we can deliver that product sooner, right? Because you want to get that feedback from the client. So you focus on it if a team member is absent. Then a card is blocked, stale, or at risk, which meaning that it's going to be at risk of being late. Maybe you have a deadline on that, right? Or what we talked about before, WIP limits. If they're not respected. We didn't go into detail of that, but if you're not respecting the WIP limits, how can we get it to where the team is now at a level of comfort from getting their work in progress, which is what WIP is. Or also if a queue is bottlenecked. And I can go into more detail about that later. I don't want to spend too much time. I'm almost out of time here. But I did want to go back over just real quick the summary of the impact that we saw with this particular team in implementing Kanban. So the first thing they saw was they realized their cash flow earlier, right? So they were able to get their product out to their client sooner, and they may have been able to improve their product sooner as well, right? Because you're getting that feedback from the client faster. They were able to increase their gross revenue, and like I said, it may not be the same percentage that you got. Maybe you'll get more, maybe you'll get less. But again, it's free money, right? So I don't know about you, but I would prefer that over not free money. And so another thing that they were able to do is they were able to create capacity for the team, right? So the team is the same cash burn for those of you that are in business. It's the same money you're spending on that team, but they were able to produce 2 more potential revenue streams in a year. I mean, that's pretty big in my opinion. And then this is something that we didn't really go over, but it also improved the quality and the customer satisfaction on the products that they were delivering. And another caveat there that we learned as well is, like I mentioned before in passing, is that the team was actually more excited about coming to work. They were happier. It improved the social culture of the team by giving them focus, which made them feel like they're actually doing something valuable and meaningful. And they felt like they were getting a reward, but in fact, you're getting a reward. And then, um, excuse me, last but not least, this is where I feel like a lot of CEOs and C-level executives get really excited is we were able to establish predictable expectations for their business. So you get that predictability of the pattern of expectations of when you can deliver things can be hugely beneficial to your company and to your team. And so last but not least, I want to mention it one more time, but as you can see, hopefully now with a little bit more information, you've seen that Kanban is a low-risk experiment with a massive reward. And I'd love to, I could talk about this a lot longer, but I don't want to keep going because I want to respect our time here. But yes, I'd love to talk to you more about that. I am actually looking at the summer to do a class called Starting Kanban. If you want to go to this URL here, you can sign up for an email list that I'm going to start building to determine the interest in Little Rock to see if there's enough interest here to do a public class. And so if you're interested in that, or feel free to reach out to me on email. But yeah, I'm super excited to be sharing this today. Do I have any questions before I wrap up? That's pretty much it. Yes?
Did this create a permanent change in the culture of your customer client?
Yes, but like with anything, change is difficult, right? And so with this client, one of the things that we recommend is you get an internal champion for that team or for that group to continue to foster that and encourage that, right? Because like all of us, we go back to our old habits. And that's the thing that I've learned the most about Kanban is what we naturally want to do, like, oh crud, I've got to get a lot of things done. Let me start a bunch of things, which is really the opposite of what I've found we should do based on the things I've learned about Kanban is instead of starting a bunch of things, I should focus on finishing, and then I get actually more work done. So those kind of things that are in our minds naturally, we can always slip back to, but that's where you can get someone in your team internally that can kind of help you continue to focus on that.
Yeah, people like to silo and specialize in order to sort of protect their area. So I find that these agile techniques try to break that down, and that's a bad habit. Or
Yeah. Right.
It's a habit that you have to overcome.
Absolutely. Specialization can be a huge detriment to your company, right? Because if there's only one person in the company that can solve XYZ software problem or whatever problem in your business, and he's on vacation or she's on vacation and you're hosed and you've got to get this thing, I'm a big fan of generalists more than I am of specialists. It's like they call it the T-shape, right? Where they do have their areas of specialty, but they can also do more than that. You had another question? That's interesting you say that. I've been learning more and more because as you guys might know, my wife is a marketing person, and some of the things that they're doing even in the marketing space now are crazy to think about how they're implementing Kanban in that to help them get things done. I'm working with a client now that actually they use Kanban across their entire organization. So, it's really more of anyone that is trying to be getting their work done. Obviously, I have a slant towards software side of things, right? But technology is in everything today. But that's a good question. I don't really have a unique only financial services or only this area because I do believe that it can help. Basically, it's a better way to get work done. Yeah.
I noticed you use the word cards.
Mm-hmm.
You use a special kind of software like Atlassian, kind of thing to control your workflow.
Right. So. I do. A lot of our clients do. I don't prescribe a particular one. That's the one thing that I love about Kanban is they're not real prescriptive and you should use this tool and this is going to solve all your problems. Even in the first class that I do, like the very full day training class that I do, I try not to talk about tools at all because it's not focusing on the tool. It's more about understanding to unlearn some of the things that we naturally want to do and get better at that. But yeah, the tools can help with some of that. Atlassian's got a great tool, Jira. There's several on the market that are really good. Yes?
What's the process that you follow to implement these things?
Well, so what we do is we generally will start with an engagement where we talk to them about understanding how they're getting work done today. Because like I said with Kanban, is they go with what they do today. And just like I talked about in my case study where we'll find a couple of key things that we can help them kind of focus on and experiment with, and then they improve upon it, right? But it's just like I was actually helping a friend facilitate a Scrum class last week, and training at a company here in Little Rock, actually. And it's just like with Scrum and any other, change in your organization, it's going to take hard work, right? Like there's things that it's going to take some time, but that's what we do is we start, I prefer to start with like one team, not like 12 teams at once, right? Like pick one team to kind of focus on, figure out what we can do, find a few things to tweak, because just like with the scientific method, if you remember that from school, it's you want to change as few things as possible so you know if this change was successful or not successful. And that's kind of that's the approach we generally take.
So, and then how long would you say it takes in average? How long do you say it would come in? A few months?
Well, I personally would say that in my experience with a lot of the case studies that I've seen and different clients, there's one of the most popular ones is in, you may have heard of the Blue Book. If you're any familiar at all with Kanban, they call it the Blue Book, which is the one that David J. Anderson did for software, like applying Kanban to software. Because Kanban started at the Toyota system, if you didn't know that. I didn't go into the details of that, but it started back in manufacturing. But David J. Anderson applies it in like 2010, I believe it was. He wrote the book on applying it to software. So in that book, he talks about a case study where it was at Microsoft, and they took, I think it was like 6 or 8 months. They took like the worst performing team completely, like they were basically about to fire everybody. And they were in India. They were going to fire everyone, and they implemented some of the things before it was even called Kanban in the software industry to kind of focus on some of these key habits, right? And they were able to transform that team to be the best performing team in like 6 to 8 months. But I mean, again, some of them are long. I mean, again, it depends on the team. It depends on several factors, right? So I hate to give like a specific prescription of like it's going to take you 12 months or less. It just depends on the team. But it can be like you can see a lift in the way you're getting work done just by implementing a few of these things to start with.
But then how do you charge for this? It's a consulting, but do you have a fee for the project, or how do you do it?
Usually it's a coaching engagement. So we'll do some sort of coaching engagement where it's like, well, Paul will come and help with our team and be here one day a week or one day a month or whatever we determine is needed to help them. But again, I'm a big believer in I don't need to be owning this process, right? I'm here to help guide, but I want your team to get excited about it and own it, because that gets you more benefit from your team, right? As they start owning and embedding the concepts and principles and habits into their own way, the way they're doing work, it's so much more beneficial for your company. So the idea is like, as I start an engagement with the client, my goal is to work myself out of that engagement because I want them to, teach them to fish, right? Like that's my goal. Anytime I talk to a client, that's why I love teaching this stuff. It's great. Any other questions? Well, thank you.